Welcome back. Will Connecticut legalize the sale of recreational marijuana? That'll be decided in the coming days. But what can we learn from Massachusetts? That state made it legal in December of 2016. Chief political reporter Susan Raff went up across the state lines to our north to find out. She joins us now from the Eyewitness newsroom. So, Susan, that's the big question. What did you find up in Mass?
Eric, I think with everything you find that there are pros and cons, and that's why we went to Massachusetts, because as you know, Connecticut lawmakers are once again trying to legalize recreational marijuana. The governor wants to do it. And one of the things that we keep hearing over and over again is the fact that it will eliminate and wipe out the black market. But we spoke to the district attorney in Hampton County, Massachusetts, which pretty much covers the Springfield area. And he says, despite legalization, the black market is alive and well.
I think the thinking was that legalizing marijuana and thereby having it, controlled and regulated by the state, sold out in the open in controlled circumstances, policed circumstances, if you will, would reduce or eliminate that black market, which was, I think, one of the objectives, right, of the government. We have not seen that in reality, and that could be attributable to a number of things, including that the legalized market isn't totally up and running. We're certainly seeing a continuation of violence around marijuana, particularly home invasion cases where people are using violence and force to make their way into houses or homes of people who are selling marijuana at a lower level or at a higher level.
So, Susan, I want to ask you about that, because one of the big things we've heard from Connecticut supporters of this legislation is, listen, people are going to go across the state lines from Connecticut to Massachusetts. And I know you and I were talking earlier. They see a lot of Connecticut customers up there. But should there be a concern if the black market's not going to be shut down? Do you think that's something that state lawmakers need to look at?
Yes, and I think obviously state lawmakers say, and the governor has said, people are going to Massachusetts and they're buying it there. Why shouldn't Connecticut cash in on that? And there's also maybe those pushing it feel that there's a pro to regulating it and making it legal. It does make it safer because obviously it's tested, and what people are buying out on the black market, out on the streets, they don't know exactly what's in it. But we should also point out that what's being sold in the stores in Massachusetts is a lot more expensive. So there are still going to be people who are going to buy it out on the streets.
I think, to the extent that people are getting their marijuana from legal sources, they're going to get it one way or the other. So at least we know this is regulated, this is safe, there are no chemical compounds or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and so that is obviously an advantage, that it is being tested. If you're going up to a dispensary, whether it's in Mass or maybe someday in Connecticut, it is tested, Susan. But I know one of the biggest things is law enforcement. We had a police chief on a couple weeks ago who said if someone's driving and they're high, it's very different than driving drunk because it's tough to pick up on that marijuana use right there at that traffic stop. Is that what they're seeing up in Massachusetts as well?
That's really the most challenging component of all this, and that is for police. You heard it here when you had the police chief on and other law enforcement. The problem is this is not alcohol, so it's hard to test how people are, how they're impaired, if they're over the limit, and marijuana stays in your system for a long time. So the district attorney also feels that maybe law enforcement right now, they may be hesitant to pull people over simply for the fact that they may not have the evidence that they need to prove this in court. It is very challenging. Here's what he had to say about that.
Because now it's a legalized substance, people are under the misimpression that they can smoke while in their car and driving or before they get in their car and drive. And that's not necessarily true. But more difficult than drunk driving is the enforcement procedures around marijuana and driving, because we don't have the same sorts of tests or clues that we get with alcohol, and it makes it very difficult for police and ultimately for prosecutors to prove that someone was inebriated beyond a legal limit while driving his or her car under the influence of marijuana.
Now, I know there's funding in the governor's bill to try to increase the number of these drug recognition experts. Is that something that might, put those concerns aside, Susan?
It might, but keep in mind these highly trained DREs, drug officers, and they do have them in Massachusetts. They're very expensive. They have to be trained. Not all police departments in Massachusetts, we're told, have them. So if Connecticut does fulfill that promise and does have those drug experts, highly trained officers in the police departments, that will help it. I want to bring you some context. Several years ago, we did a story about testing those kits to be able to see if people saliva with marijuana. They're about $5,000 a pop. So those are very expensive. So the key component in all of this will be the funding for those police departments to be able to pull people over if they feel that there is buzz driving involved.
Now, of course, one of the big issues in all this, as it is probably with just about every bill that you cover up at the Capitol, money. We just saw this week New York talking about a deal there to perhaps legalize marijuana. We've been talking about Massachusetts this morning, many other states doing the same thing. So Connecticut, of course, is seeing dollars go out of state potentially. That's got to be a big part of this. And not only the tax dollars that could be raised, but there's some equity issues as well. Talk about both those things, Susan. Those are a big part of this balancing act, right?
Yeah, well, let's take a look at the equity part of this. And I know Massachusetts has something similar, but in Connecticut, what they want to do and what's been proposed is allowing people of color in neighborhoods that have been hard hit by crime and drugs to allow them to have licenses to grow and sell marijuana. And that's important to people in those neighborhoods, especially lawmakers who represent them. So that's a key component of that. Also, possibly erasing some previous criminal records. That could be controversial. But as you and I have discussed several times, Connecticut does and has decriminalized marijuana, simple possession. So people are not spending a lot of time in prison right now for marijuana. But the money really is the driving factor in all of this. Yes, people from Connecticut are going to Massachusetts. They are buying it there. And people are smoking pot. And some say, people are not going to just start smoking pot because it's legalized. But I think that the district attorney wanted it to be clear that if money was not involved in this, would we be having this discussion, and would Connecticut and other states be trying to legalize recreational marijuana?
There is certainly a lot of money to be had out there. Susan, thank you very much. We'll be keeping an eye on this at the Capitol, as you will, and we'll be checking back in with you. Thank you very much for a few minutes this morning.
Thank you.
If you'd like to share your thoughts about our interviews this morning, you can send us an email. Our address is ct21@wfsb.com. We'll be sharing some of those comments with you each week. That is CT21 for this week. CBS Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley is next. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll meet you back here in Studio A next Sunday morning.
News. Watch us live wherever you are on our mobile, on our streaming news app. And you can also watch us on Roku, Apple TV.